signs. I had never been taken there in my life. My mother had chosen it, which should have been my very first warning sign. Diane Mercer never spent a single dollar on me unless there was a strategic reason for it. Tonight, she was dressed in a sharp, slate gray cashmere sweater, the one she reserved exclusively for high-stakes board meetings and funerals. My father, Wesley, had booked the reservation under her name, answering the hostess before I could even open my mouth. Looking around the table, there was no celebratory banner, no balloon tied to the back of my chair, and no birthday cake waiting in the kitchen. For a milestone 25-year celebration, the table was completely barren. The air between my parents possessed the clinical, suffocating politeness of a jury preparing to read a guilty verdict. For the past 4 years, I had earned my living as a paralegal at a prestigious trusts and estates firm downtown. I spent my days inside rooms exactly like this one. I booked tables like this for corporate clients, for contract signings, and for the tense, quiet conversations families hold when a patriarch passes away and the money begins to shift. I knew the exact difference between a family dinner and a legal deposition. And tonight, this room had the freezing temperature of a deposition. So, I did what my training taught me to do whenever a room goes cold. I regulated my breathing, kept my posture straight, and subtly counted the exits. That was when I noticed the small brass number standing on a table behind us and to the left. Table 9. I anchored that number in my mind, holding onto it without fully understanding why, the way a traveler notes a landmark before realizing they will desperately need to find their way back. On the tablecloth next to my water glass, I placed a plain, thin manila folder. My mother glanced down at it, likely assuming it was a resume or perhaps a birthday card I had brought for them. She had absolutely no idea what I had actually sealed inside it. To truly understand why the cruelty of this evening didn't completely break me, you have to understand what birthdays looked like growing up in the Mercer household. When I was a little girl, my birthday was always marked by a single candle. Not as a beautiful family tradition, but a literal solitary candle pressed into a cheap grocery store cupcake that my mother had grabbed on her commute home. She would place it on the kitchen counter, never bothering to refrigerate it, and I would watch the frosting sweat under the fluorescent lights while she stood in the hallway taking business calls. Yet 3 weeks later, my cousin Brett's birthday would arrive. His celebrations featured rented bounce houses, professional magicians, and caterers circulating silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. Brett was my Aunt Renee's son. Brett was blood. I distinctly remember the year I turned 8. I asked my mother if I could finally have a real party with my classmates. My Aunt Renee was sitting at the kitchen island, drinking my mother's expensive wine, and she answered before my mom could even turn around. "We can only manage one grand event a month, sweetheart," Renee had said, her voice dripping with a soft, patronizing pity. That was the lesson that stuck with me the longest. How remarkably kind people can sound while they are explaining your smallness to you. So, I learned the arithmetic of our house very quickly. A single cupcake costs less than a party. A child who learns to ask for nothing is significantly cheaper than a child who expects to be treated equally. By the time I turned 9, I stopped asking for cakes or presents altogether. I could see that my silence made the family ledger easier to balance, and being easy to manage felt like the only currency I possessed to keep my place at their table. I didn't allow myself to feel sad about it back then. I simply told myself it was efficient. That is the hidden trap of growing up useful. You never actually notice that you have been assigned a price tag until someone finally decides to read the number out loud. And sitting across from Diane Mercer at the Foundry, I could feel her clearing her throat to read it. I had packed 2 duffel bags and left their house the very week I turned 18, carrying nothing but a community college acceptance letter I had filled out in secret. Nobody drove me to the dorms. I worked grueling night shifts behind a pharmacy counter to pay my rent, took classes at dawn, and eventually transferred to a state university where I put myself through a rigorous paralegal program by waiting tables on weekends. I paid for every single cent of my existence. I don't say that to sound heroic, but because it is the crucial piece of the puzzle for what happened next. Absolutely nothing was handed to me. By 25, I was one of the sharpest paralegals at my firm. I spent my days auditing other people's generational wealth, organizing the fragments of a person's life after they were no longer around to hold on to it. I drafted the dry, legal provisions that ultimately dictated everything: beneficiary designations, asset distribution schedules, the quiet, binding language that determines who gets to eat and who gets left out in the cold long after the funeral flowers have withered. I could read a complex estate trust the exact same way some people can read a person's facial expressions. Yet the tragic irony of my life, the one I couldn't bring myself to laugh at for years, was this. I could construct ironclad boundaries for a total stranger. I could sit across from a grieving widow and outline precisely what she was legally owed and what she wasn't. But I could not, for the life of me, force my own family to want me. The only person in that entire lineage I ever spoke to regularly was my grandmother, Nana Ruth. Every Sunday at precisely 4 o'clock, all through my college years and long after, my phone would ring. She was the only Mercer who ever answered the call as if she had been sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring. And it was a passing comment Nana made to me years ago that turned out to be the exact hinge the entire evening swung upon. Nana Ruth Mercer was my father's mother, and she was the sole adult in that family who ever made me feel like a living, breathing human being rather than a line item on a balance sheet. She had fierce opinions about everything and offered apologies for absolutely nothing. When I was 12 years old, I remember sobbing in her kitchen because my cousin Brett had taunted me, screaming that I wasn't a real Mercer. Nana had set down her dish towel, lifted my chin firmly with her hand, and delivered the exact sentence I carried in my chest for the next 13 years. "You were chosen, sweetheart. Not collected." Then she made me a grilled cheese sandwich and let me stay up long past my bedtime. Nana passed away when I was 23. At her funeral, I stood up and delivered the only eulogy that remembered her for the woman she actually was, rather than the assets she was leaving behind. Within a single month of her casket lowering into the ground, my parents quietly packed up our cramped, split-level suburban home and moved into the massive historic estate on Linden Road, the prominent house that had belonged to the Mercer name for generations, the one inextricably tied to Nana's legacy in ways I understood far better than they realized. I didn't question the sudden move at the time. I was entirely consumed by grief. But there was something else Nana had murmured to me during one of our final Sunday phone calls, her voice fragile and thin over the line, that I had never been the specific asset listed on the ledger before. "That sounds wonderful, Mom," I said sweetly, mirroring the exact mask of politeness she had spent years teaching me to wear. After I hung up the phone, I sat at my small kitchen table for hours, doing exactly what I am trained to do. I mapped out timelines. I cross-referenced the physical house on Linden Road. I analyzed the sudden appearance of the word blood in our family communications, noting how perfectly it aligned with this exact month, this exact season, and the specific phrase my grandmother had left me with before she passed. And then, my eyes drifted to the second manila folder already resting inside my briefcase, the one I had quietly assembled 6 months earlier for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with my mother, and everything to do with finally discovering the true story of where I came from. I didn't call my parents back to confront them or ask desperate questions. I didn't give them a single hint that I had spent my lunch hours at the county clerk's office. Instead, I picked up the phone and initiated a few highly specific calls of my own. Quiet ones. The exact kind of calls you make when you have decided that you will not, under any circumstances, allow yourself to be ambushed. You ensure that you are entirely ready. I won't reveal just yet who was on the other end of those phone calls, but I will tell you the definitive rule I live my life by now. The one Nana never stated aloud but demonstrated through her actions. When my mother starts acting sweet, someone at that table is about to lose everything. I simply took the necessary steps to ensure that this time it wouldn't be me. People naturally assume a family dispute of this magnitude is entirely about the money. And I completely understand why. There is always a hidden will, a disputed piece of property, or a legal folder slid across a table in a dimly lit restaurant. But as I sat in the driver's seat of my car in the Foundry's parking lot that night, the engine switched off and my hands resting perfectly steady on the steering wheel, the element I was most terrified of losing didn't carry a dollar sign. I was terrified of losing the final fragile illusion that I had ever actually belonged to a family. Because as freezing as that house had been, as overtly transactional as every single birthday candle and leftover casserole had felt, it was still the only origin story I possessed. They were still, by law, my parents. And if they severed that remaining thread tonight in the exact clinical manner I suspected they had planned, I would become the exact definition of what my cousin Brett had called me when we were kids. An outsider. Just a girl someone had picked up out of convenience and could put down just as easily. That was the exact psychological wound they were aiming for, and they knew it because it was the exact same pressure point they had been pressing their thumbs into for 25 years. What they completely failed to account for, however, was that the wound had already healed. 6 months of quiet truth can do that for a person, provided the right people are the ones who find you. I checked my reflection one final time in the visor mirror, adjusted the collar of my blazer, tucked the manila folder firmly under my arm, and stepped out into the night air. I walked across the pavement with the absolute, unshakable calm of a woman who has already read the final chapter of a book that everyone else at the table believes is still being written. I wasn't walking into a disownment. I was walking into a goodbye that I had already scripted. They just hadn't received their pages yet. We ordered a round of drinks before anyone initiated a genuine conversation. My mother spent the first 10 minutes praising the restaurant's extensive wine selection. My father recounted a tedious story about the parking garage layout that he had already told during our brief phone call earlier in the week. And then, somewhere right between the arrival of the artisan bread basket and the main entrees that none of us would actually end up touching, Diane folded her hands neatly on the table, leaned forward and shifted into the voice. I recognized that specific tone instantly. It was the exact same clinical cadence she used when she would return a Christmas gift right in front of my face, detailing exactly why the item wasn't practical for our household budget. "We have always done our absolute best for you, Paige," she began, her tone perfectly even. Wesley nodded along in perfect synchronization, exactly a half-second behind her, just as he had nodded along behind every single one of her directives for the last 30 years. "We provided you with a roof over your head, a private high school education, significantly more than many children in your position could ever dream of receiving," she continued. I let her speak. I kept my left hand resting completely flat over the manila folder beside my plate, watching my father's eyes dart down to the edge of the paper and quickly snap away. The folder featured a small typed label on the tab, with just the very top edge visible above the line of my fingers. If he looked closely enough, he could read the first 4 letters of the title. And he was definitely looking. I deliberately covered the remainder of the text with my thumb, not out of a desire to hide it from him, but simply to let the curiosity settle into his mind. I watched the realization begin to do its slow, agonizing work on his posture. My mother continued her monologue, lecturing me about the concepts of sacrifice, about how a child needs to fully comprehend the sheer financial burden of being raised. As she spoke, my mind drifted back to the image of that sweating, unrefrigerated supermarket cupcake and the single melting candle. I kept my lips sealed. Then she paused. She took a deliberate sip of her wine, set the crystal glass back down onto the tablecloth with the flawless precision of a corporate presenter reaching a slide she had rehearsed in the mirror, and delivered the exact line that opened the door to everything. "There is something, Paige, that you should have been told a very long time ago," my mother stated, her eyes locking onto mine. "You are adopted. We brought you into our home when you were an infant. You were never biologically a Mercer. I want you to know that we never intended to keep this a secret from you forever." She stared intently at my face as the words left her mouth, and in that split second, I saw exactly what she was waiting for. She was waiting for the total collapse. This entire evening, the obscure corner table, the expensive cashmere sweater, the calculated dramatic pauses, had been meticulously engineered to culminate right here at this exact second. It was all designed to watch her adopted daughter realize she had been a complete stranger in her own home all along, shattering her into pieces that Diane could easily sweep up before paying the bill and walking out of my life forever. I would love to tell you that the revelation didn't sting. It did. A small part of every human being inherently expects a solid floor to be beneath their feet, and mine had just been informed that the floor had never existed. But I had already had 6 long months to process this reality in private. The only true revelation my mother delivered across that table was just how remarkably little she actually knew about the daughter she had raised. She leaned in closer, her expression softening into something terrifyingly gentle, and delivered the sentence that will echo in the quiet corners of my mind for the rest of my days. "We only kept you for the benefits." They stopped producing passive income. I reached out my hand and took a slow sip of my water. My fingers did not shake. I consciously noted the absolute steadiness of my grip, filing it away as a small, beautiful birthday gift to myself. Then my father executed the final task he had come to perform. He reached into the sleek leather portfolio he had placed on the empty chair beside him, the one I had initially assumed held a standard birthday card, and slid a crisp, stapled sheath of legal documents across the table until it made physical contact with the rim of my plate. "We have already officially filed the paperwork with the county to formalize the separation," he stated, his voice flat and rehearsed. "You will not be included in our will. You will not be listed as a beneficiary on any insurance policies, properties, or accounts under our names. We wanted to deliver this to you cleanly in person, so there would be absolutely no confusion or legal contesting later on." He had clearly practiced the word cleanly. I could practically hear the expensive billable hours of the corporate lawyer who had coached him on the delivery. And this is the exact part of the story that I have never been able to make my family fully comprehend. The singular moment that completely inverted the power dynamics of that room without me having to raise my voice or shed a single tear. I looked down at the caption printed on the cover page of the legal document. Because of my years of training at the firm, I scanned and fully comprehended the text within 4 seconds. I saw the title, the filing codes, and the structural language, and I instantly realized the monumental blunder they had just committed. They had filed their paperwork against the completely wrong legal instrument. They had spent thousands of dollars out of their own pockets to legally cut me out of a personal estate that was, frankly, completely beside the point. Meanwhile, they had left entirely untouched and unexamined the one master document that actually dictated everything. They had no idea what I knew. They genuinely believed that the financial power in our family flowed directly through their own modest personal will. And so, that was exactly where they had aimed their expensive little knife. I didn't offer a single correction. In the legal world, you never interrupt the opposing side when they are making a fatal mistake. You sit back and you let them finish. So, I calmly slid the paperwork exactly 1 inch back toward the absolute center of the table, neither signing it nor verbally rejecting it. I simply allowed them to continue operating under the blissful delusion that they had won. Right at that moment, the muffled sound of Aunt Renee's voice emerged from the speakerphone of my mother's smartphone, which was resting open inside her designer purse on the table. Of course she was listening in. Renee had been the chief architect behind half of the financial strategies in our family for decades. "Blood always looks after blood, Paige." Renee's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding as warm and inviting as a razor blade hidden in a bowl of soup. "You've always understood how the world works." I didn't cry. To be completely honest, a tiny wounded part of me, the 12-year-old girl still trapped inside my chest, had been bracing for this exact confrontation ever since the night Brett told me I wasn't real. But the 25-year-old professional sitting at the foundry merely took another slow, controlled sip of water and set the glass back down onto the wood without making a single sound. And as I did, I watched an expression cross my mother's face that I had genuinely never witnessed in my entire life. Disappointment. Not disappointment directed at my actions, but disappointment at the overall performance. She had spent months scriptwriting this grand dramatic scene with a sobbing, devastated girl occupying the lead role. But the girl sitting across from her wasn't sobbing. She wasn't breaking down. And it was completely ruining the cinematic ending Diane had envisioned. "Aren't you going to say anything at all?" my mother demanded, a sharp, brittle edge bleeding into her tone now. It was the frantic instability of a director whose actors have completely gone off script. I calmly considered the question. I weighed the absolute flood of words I could have unleashed across that table. 25 long years of quiet compliance backed up behind one tiny fragile emotional dam. And then she made the exact fatal mistake that people of her psychological profile always make when they panic. She tried to fill the suffocating silence by reaching back for the weapon that had inflicted the most damage the first time, fully expecting it to execute me a second time. "We only kept you for the benefits, Paige," she repeated, her delivery significantly slower this time, leaning heavily on every single syllable, desperately trying to draw a physical drop of blood she could actually see. But a weapon completely loses its edge the second time it is deployed by the exact same hand. The first time she said it, it had felt like a devastating revelation. The second time she uttered it, it transformed into nothing more than a pathetic confession. And it had absolutely nothing to do with my worth as a human being. It illuminated everything about her character, and absolutely nothing about mine. I took my cloth napkin from my lap, folded it with meticulous care, smoothed out the creases once, and forced her to watch me completely refuse to break. Then, right behind her shoulder at table 9, I watched a woman who possessed the exact same distinct, sharp jawline as me slowly turn her head toward our table and go completely still. My mother scoffed, rolling her eyes as she reached out a manicured hand to flip the folder open. My father leaned in beside her, his brow furrowed in annoyance. I watched the exact second the light drained completely from Diane Mercer's face. She scanned the formal letterhead of the estate's attorney first. Then her eyes dropped to the trust distribution schedule, highlighting the exact date. My 25th birthday, marking the permanent cessation of their monthly income and their immediate eviction from the Linden Road property. Finally, her gaze landed on the birth certificate, staring at the name Susan Hale. My father's face went entirely pale. His mouth parted slightly, his eyes darting back and forth across the financial figures like an accountant watching a catastrophic market crash unfold in real time on his screen. What is the meaning of this? Diane stammered, her clinical, rehearsed composure shattering into jagged, panicked fragments. Wesley, what is this document? Wesley couldn't answer her. He knew exactly what it meant. He knew that the house they lived in, the lifestyle they maintained, and the financial leverage they thought they held over my head had just completely vanished into thin air. They hadn't cut me out of their future. They had accidentally spent their final evening realizing they had been entirely cut out of mine. I didn't stay to watch them attempt to calculate a way out of the legal corner they had backed themselves into. I didn't offer them the satisfaction of a shouting match or a dramatic scene. I slowly stood up from my chair, adjusted my blazer, and looked down at the two people who had spent 25 years treating my existence like a burdensome financial deficit. "Thank you for the dinner," I said softly, offering them a small, genuine smile. "But my family is waiting."